you've probably heard that a glass of red wine per day is good for your heart. In the 1990s, the world fell in love with a simple idea that the French could drink red wine, eat cheese, eat a lot of butter, and still stay heart healthy. But the science missed quite a lot of things there. Today we're going to be investigating the French paradox and whether this paradox has stood the test of time, what makes red wine stand out from all of the other alcohols, and by the end of the video you're going to know what science says about alcohol today and whether there is indeed a safe level of consumption. All of the resources that I am using are linked down in the description box below if you want to check out something for yourself. Enough rambling, let's get right into the video. In the late 1950s to early 1960s, data was gathered from 40 countries around the world regarding their mortality from cardiovascular disease. Around that time, money was already being put into research to investigate the link between one's diet and cardiovascular disease, and some popular papers at the time, such as the 7-country study, had established that there is indeed a connection between the consumption of dietary fat, coming specifically from saturated fats and cholesterol, and higher blood pressure. This connection in particular seemed to explain what the World Health Organization had found from all of the data in 38 out of the 40 countries, but two specific ones stood out, and those were France and Finland. Although the diets in France and Finland did not differ significantly in fat content and cholesterol content, the mortality from cardiovascular disease in France was between 4 and 5 times lower compared to the one in Finland. This seemingly unexplainable observation was named the French paradox and started this whole discussion. A few years later, in 1992, the infamous paper came out by 2 French scientists which proposed that the secret behind the healthier French hearts was their higher consumption of alcohol and red wine in particular. This one study then popularized the idea that the French are healthier because they drink red wine on a daily basis. This fantasy then quickly took over the world, and although a year later, in 1993, another study came out by Artaud et al. Which challenged the idea, this paper in particular, I suppose, was ignored since it provides a solution that is a lot less attractive to the general public than just consuming red wine. This paper proposed that there were other variables in the diet which would explain why the French have a lower incidence of cardiovascular disease, such as a higher consumption of vegetables and fruits, and also other types of fats, monounsaturated fats in particular, compared to the Finnish, who seemed to favor butter and milk fat a lot more. Monounsaturated fats, particularly ones that come from olive oil, have been linked time and time again to a lower incidence of cardiovascular disease, especially in research that has been done on the Mediterranean diet. It is a main component of this dietary pattern. As I said, this was largely ignored, and in the coming years, a lot of research, a lot of money had been put into investigating what makes red wine beneficial to our health, which is the silver bullet compound in it, which makes our hearts healthier. Grapes and red wine, logically, contain polyphenols. Polyphenols, if you're into health and longevity, you would probably know this. Those are plant compounds which are present in a lot of different fruits and vegetables and possess important for us antioxidative and anti-inflammatory properties. They come in numerous shapes and forms in the different types of plant products, but the one that stands out in red wine and which became the main topic of investigation is resveratrol. Resveratrol is a naturally occurring compound in plants which is built as a response to stress, injury, or fungal infection. It is therefore present not only in grapes but also in other things such as soybeans and peanuts. Since the first human clinical trial in 2004, there have been over 150 studies conducted worldwide with about 6,000 participants. This definitely reflects the significant and sustained scientific interest in resveratrol's potential. Resveratrol has been investigated for probably every health benefit that you can think of, starting off with its antioxidant properties, neuroprotective properties, positive impact on the reproductive system, effects on cancer cells, etc. But the most prominent ones, which are confirmed in a larger part of the research, are its positive influences on inflammation and oxidative stress, and also some modest effects on insulin regulation. Since it is a powerful antioxidant, resveratrol would also therefore improve blood flow by decreasing the oxidation of the bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol in our blood, which is one of the main drivers behind the development of atherosclerosis or the narrowing of the arteries in cardiovascular disease. If resveratrol is such a magical component, then why is it not being recommended to basically everyone to manage the risk of cardiovascular disease? First of all, in different papers, it is tested in a lot of different dosages, ranging from 5 milligrams up to 5 grams of resveratrol. Generally, it is well tolerated by the human body in doses up to 1 gram of resveratrol. This is why in a lot of supplements, the dosage of resveratrol is exactly this 1 gram, although it is based on somewhat of robust evidence and no specific dose has been established that would be effective for all of the different things that resveratrol has been investigated for. The second question that remains is its absorption by the human body. We generally do not absorb all of the polyphenols that we consume, and a lot of them do leave our body intact and do not exert its positive functions in us, unfortunately. And the third thing about resveratrol is that it is found in pretty negligible concentrations in red wine, and all of these positive influences that have been established in scientific research are found in studies which do not include red wine consumption, but the administration of a supplement containing resveratrol. In order to get to this clinically effective dose of 1 gram, one would have to drink thousands of liters of red wine per day, which is neither beneficial nor possible for an individual. The failure to validate resveratrol as the remarkable compound behind these observed trends in the population suggests that there is a much more broader picture, more complex picture when talking about alcohol consumption, cardiovascular disease, and our diet. This is why now we're moving into the net impact of alcohol on the human health and all of the evidence that we have today. The general conclusion is that any perceived benefits are vastly outweighed by significant health risks that come with increased consumption of alcohol, especially since it is an addictive substance. Alcohol has been classified as a class 1 carcinogen as early as the 1980s, which puts it in the same group as plutonium, asbestos, tobacco use, processed meats, and even UV lights. Anytime I talk about cancer on the channel, I need to emphasize that these classifications, class 1, class 2A, class 2B carcinogen, reflect the evidence that we have on this specific compound and its connection to the increased risk of cancer. This does not reflect the magnitude of the risk itself. Therefore, consuming processed meats would not increase your risk of cancer with the same magnitude that smoking would, or alcohol consumption would, or exposure to sunlight or plutonium would. This classification is made to simply classify the strength of the evidence that we have on a specific biochemical compound. A recent meta-analysis from 2023 investigated specifically the increased risk of different types of cancers, all types of cancers, and alcohol consumption. And the aim was to define whether there is a safe level at which alcohol can be consumed. Such safe level could not be determined, as the results of this specific paper show, and even light alcohol consumption was statistically significantly associated with an increased risk of a number of cancers such as colorectal, breast, and prostate cancer. There was a dose-response relationship established, which means the higher the consumption of alcohol, the higher the risk of certain cancers. Before you start freaking out if you have a glass of wine from time to time, this 100% does not mean that you're for sure going to suffer from these negative effects if you are a very light type of drinker. And if I have to be honest, the general increase in the risk was a lot lower compared to when you go over to light to moderate drinking. You're going to see on the graph that I'm going to put here. While alcohol consumption is generally, of course, not promoted, not supported because of all of the detrimental effects that it has on our health, especially in higher amounts, and because of its addictive nature, enjoying a drink once a week, once every 2 weeks, like even 2 drinks, generally light amounts of alcohol, when you are going out or meeting at home your friend group as a part of your social life, is probably not going to increase your health risk of certain conditions by a bunch, especially in the context of an overall healthy lifestyle. A metabolic condition is usually not the consequence of one specific health factor. Most of the time, the entire lifestyle, the combination of different factors, lead to the development of a certain disease. Therefore, if you are enjoying this time out and experiencing some mental health benefits, stress relief from this type of experience, considering that you are overall a healthy person and you also have regular physical activity, a diet rich in whole foods, I believe more and more people are developing phobias from every single thing that is out there, mostly because we believe in clickbait economy, and every second video that I see on YouTube is with huge red text screaming at me that this is the worst thing for my health. I do not see a lot of positivity out there. Every couple of months a new thing is being demonized, and this is stressing out the population, especially the health conscious population. This is why I try to emphasize when I talk about certain things that what is more important is the bigger picture of your life and not one specific thing, especially if it is consumed in negligible amounts. Apart from cancer risk, an increased alcohol consumption for heavy drinkers, as I'm sure you have already heard, is associated with a lot of damage to the nervous system, along with a decreased nutrient absorption, malnutrition, and numerous negative effects on our health. I believe this is general knowledge for the population. Going back to the French paradox, and another study from 2023 by Zhao et al. Investigated whether this so-called J-shaped curve is still present when one eliminates the sick quitter and other types of bias. The J-shaped curve illustrates the observation that there is a higher risk of cardiovascular mortality for people who are abstainers and do not consume any alcohol than for people who are light drinkers, and for moderate and heavy drinking, this risk increases rapidly. This is why it is called a J-shaped curve. The sick quitter bias is probably the most important type of bias in this specific study, since it would exclude abstainers who have quit alcohol for good because they are now suffering from some type of medical condition. We do not know exactly at which year they decided to quit alcohol and whether their health issues right now are not a consequence of heavy drinking prior to that. After this bias was then eliminated, the J-shaped curve practically disappeared and the French paradox was now non-existent. So this finding, combined with the proposed explanation as early as in 1993, gives an explanation as to why the French paradox is not really a paradox and it is indeed false interpretation of the data. So why do such things happen in science from time to time, and why are certain trends being so falsely interpreted? Starting off with the phenomenon ecological fallacy, which is a huge limitation for such ecological studies. This reflects the error where trends for whole populations are reduced down to single individuals. Therefore, in this case, the trend that France had a lower cardiovascular mortality rate and a higher consumption of alcohol does not prove that the high consumption of red wine caused the lower mortality rate from cardiovascular disease. This is an enormous oversimplification of the data. On top of that, here I've written lack of uniqueness. This is because the lower cardiovascular mortality rate compared to Finland was not something that was exclusive to France. It was an observation made also in other countries from the same region, especially the ones in the Mediterranean area. And France is definitely not the oasis of no cardiovascular disease that the media portrayed it to be. Last but not least important, there are a lot of lifestyle factors that come into play excluding the alcohol consumption and dietary fat consumption when discussing cardiovascular disease risk. That does not only include the consumption of vegetables, fruit, and healthy fats. Other crucial lifestyle factors, such as the amount of leisure physical activity among the French, could have contributed to their lower incidence of mortality from coronary heart disease. To conclude all of this, the French paradox today has been largely debunked, and the secret behind their lower incidence of cardiovascular disease is definitely not their consumption of red wine. The more probable reality is that they consume more fruits, vegetables, and whole foods in general. They have an increased amount of natural physical activity due to the infrastructure in France, and possibly even some mental health factors regarding stress and the lifestyle, the attitude towards work in general. There are 1,000 different things that shape one's lifestyle and increase or decrease one's risks of certain health conditions. I hope that now you have an idea as to why opinions on the internet might be very contradicting sometimes. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope that you enjoyed the contents of the video. Let me know down in the comments below if you have a topic of your interest that you would like me to discuss. I also have my socials in the description and my website where you can find additional sources and my nutrition counseling services. If you enjoyed today's video, do not forget to like and subscribe so you do not miss anything new from me. Thank you again for being here, and I will see you in the next one.